Hi Circuit Kids, let's have a look at our Circuit Kids gas soldering iron. So inside the case you'll see everything you need to do any of our projects. The main thing is this soldering iron unit itself. It runs on butane gas. The gas tank is on the back here and the nozzle is for refilling. Then we've got the ignition switch, then the nozzle itself. I've got the pointed tip on here at the moment, but they are interchangeable. You just screw them on and screw them off. And then we have the gas flow regulator and a little stand as well. Also inside you've got a safety cap that you can put on top of the tip to stop it from being damaged or from hurting anybody. A coil of solder wire is included, a little stand with a damp sponge that you can use for removing any solder buildup on the tip, and then a range of different soldering tips. This one cuts through styrofoam. This is a beveled or chiseled tip. Another chiseled tip. This one is a heating knife for cutting through things. And then this one is interesting. It's a little tool used for the heat shrinking tubing that you can put on wiring to cover over any bare wires. So all of that's in the kit, as well as the case to keep it all tidy. So let's have a look at how you get this soldering iron up and running. What I love about this soldering iron, especially if you're a younger person, I think it's better than the electric ones because you don't have a electrical cable running around, and I've seen a lot of electrical cables burnt through and shorted out the power with little hands in the way. So I think this one is better. It doesn't change the fact though that all soldering irons are extremely hot at this end, so you always try to be mindful of where your hands are, making sure that you don't go anywhere near this heated section. So basically what we need to do is get the gas, the butane gas, flowing, and then it flows through this nozzle, and when we press this button up it will ignite and it will cause the nozzle here to glow red, which is heating up, and then that in turn heats up the tip that you've got here. Also, if you want to use it as a bit of a blowtorch, you just remove the tip off the end here and you can use it to shrink down any heat shrinking or burn onto wood and things like that. So it's a pretty handy little tool and an essential one if you're doing any of the Circuit Kids projects. By the way, the butane you can get from your local hardware, this big can of it, or it actually comes in smaller refillable bottles. So it's really up to you and what your hardware has, but all of them have a nozzle at the top, and basically you just turn your soldering iron up so that the refill nozzle is pointing up the top there, and you push down on your gas and you can actually see it going in there. Okay, so this is now empty and this now has fuel in it. So that's how easy it is to refill it, and it lasts quite a while too. So let's have a look at igniting it. I like to keep the stand down so that if you do need to put it down in a hurry, you're not going to leave the tip on any of your desk or workspace and burn anything potentially. Alright, so it starts with this section here. It says off, on. So you push down and across. And if you listen carefully to it, you'll hear a hissing sound, and that's the gas flowing. Then we push up, hold it, and then go again, and you'll see a blue flame. So I'm looking through this little window here And once you've got that going, you only need it to be blue flaming for 3 to 5 seconds, and then you'll get this red glow. And then it's just a case of leaving it there until it heats up enough to the solder melt temperature. And you'll know when you've got it to the solder melt temperature, because if you touch on some solder, the solder will melt. So at the moment you can see it's not quite ready, but now it is. So that's how quick it heats up to temperature. I've now got solder on the tip of my soldering iron, and I'm ready to do some soldering. Let's have a look at that. Okay, so I've got my helping hands here, or my third hand, and I've wet my sponge, and what that does is it allows me just to clean off any solder off the tip so that I can start clean tipped soldering right there like that. Alright, so I'm holding it a little bit like a pencil, get it comfortable in my hands. Another thing I love about this for kids is it's got a really big, wide grip, and so therefore it's a little easier for little hands to grab onto, but it's great for big hands too. Okay, so I'm going to use my third hand here to hold a couple of things, and I'm going to do 2 different soldering demonstrations. Now, while I'm getting that ready, have a look at this graphic on the screen. So you'll see that there are a few different things that can go wrong with soldering, and it takes a little bit of practice, but it ranges from things like a cold solder, which is what happens when you haven't applied enough heat to either of the 2 objects that you're trying to solder together. You can also have too much solder, and you get this big ball of solder in the way. And you can have not enough solder, which leaves gaps and a poor contact. You can heat it too much as well, and it starts to burn the circuit board. So what we're looking for is this one that says perfect. It has like a triangular shape from the base of the pad that you're soldering to up to the pin that you're soldering it to. So that one that says perfect, that's what we're looking for. Okay, so I'm going to solder this LED, and I'm going to put that in my third hand here. Okay, so I'm going to solder this end of the LED to this jumper wire that I've got here. So I'm going to use my helping hand to act as a third hand for me. I'm going to try and line this up as close as I can get them so that they're together and lined up if possible. Okay, that's pretty close. Alright, so I've got them sitting there. Now I don't have to hold it. Now, when you're joining 2 wires or an LED and a wire or some kind of straight inline join like this, you definitely want to make sure you've applied enough heat, because once things get moving in your project, say if it's in a robot or a car or a drone or something that moves, if you've got a cold solder, it will just crack and come apart, and you'll be constantly resoldering all the time. Alright, so before I even put my solder on, I'm applying heat to the wires, and I want those wires to be hot. So the tricky part with this technique is holding things still. So I've got my arm resting on the desk. I don't want it up in the air because then my muscles will get sore and I can't hold it still any longer. Alright, so once I've got enough heat, I apply some solder wire, and then you should see it's still shiny. A good solder will be shiny, not too dull. It does dull a little bit when it cools down and hardens, but you're looking for that type of solder, and you can actually see that it's wetted both parts and kind of covered both parts. Okay, so I could probably improve that because the two components are apart a little bit there, but it's definitely solidly soldered together. So that's when you're soldering two kind of straight things in a row. Let's have a look at a common one for the Circuit Kids projects, and that's a through-hole solder. Now normally you'd have a pin or a wire or some kind of chip or something that has a leg that comes through. So this is where you'll see the wire comes through the circuit board. With that in position, it's the same thing. It won't solder very well if I don't apply heat. So this technique's a little bit different, only that you need to apply the heat to the pad and to the pin at the same time. So I'm trying to position my soldering iron so that it's touching both the circuit board pad and the pin, and then I apply heat. You'll see that it'll be shiny and it usually takes the shape of the pad. So in this case it was a square pad, and so my solder has taken up the shape of that square pad, and now you can see that that is soldered in. So that's basics of soldering. This soldering iron makes that a lot easier. When you're finished, turn it round to this switch and switch it to the off position, and it will still stay hot for quite a while, so make sure you put it out of the way. Alright, Circuit Kids, it's time to get making.